My name is Ruth Morrison, and people say you never really know your children until they see what you can no longer give them. When my husband, Henry, passed away, it was just me and Clara. I poured everything I had into making her life comfortable, paid her way through college, helped her start her business, even loaned her the down payment for her home. She used to tell me, "Mom, you're my whole world." And I believed her. The first time she said she wanted to help, it felt like love. She'd come by every weekend with that soft smile, a bag of groceries, and a notebook full of to-do lists. "Mom, let me sort your bills," she'd say. "You shouldn't have to worry about this at your age." I didn't argue. I was grateful, maybe too grateful. She started organizing my medications, calling the pharmacy, setting alarms on my phone so I wouldn't forget. Sometimes she'd frown and shake her head gently when I asked what the pills were for. "Just vitamins, Mom," she said once, with that same patient smile that used to make me feel safe. But love has a strange way of hiding control. The small things came first. She moved my checkbook, said she'd keep it safe. My mail started going to her house for convenience. She even answered my calls when the bank rang, insisting she was my caregiver. I told myself it was all kindness, that this was what good daughters did. Then one evening, I woke to the sound of her voice drifting from the kitchen. I hadn't told her I was still awake. The light from the fridge spilled across the hallway as she whispered into her phone, her tone sharp, unlike the daughter I knew. "She doesn't even notice when I change her pills. The bank believed me last time. This'll be easy." My breath froze in my chest. I stood there in the dark, listening, afraid to move, afraid to believe. My daughter, my Clara, talking about me like I was some helpless, fading woman she could fool. The next morning she made me breakfast, kissed my forehead, and asked if I remembered to take my new supplements. I looked into her eyes and smiled. "Of course, dear," I said. But something inside me shifted. That was the morning I stopped trusting her. And that was the morning I started taking notes, on everything. After that night, I started watching my own daughter the way a stranger studies danger. Quietly, carefully, pretending not to notice. But the worst part of being gaslit is how it turns your own mind into a suspect. Every time Clara smiled, every time she called me sweetheart, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just tired. That's how they get you. Not with lies that sound wild, but with ones that sound reasonable. A week later, the first rumor reached me. My neighbor, Mrs. Holbrook, leaned over the fence and said softly, "Ruth, dear, Clara mentioned you've been having trouble remembering things. You must take care of yourself." She smiled kindly, the way you'd speak to a child. My stomach twisted, but I said nothing. It was easier to nod than to defend myself. The whispers grew legs. At church, people started asking if I needed help getting home. Pastor Dennis slipped pamphlets about elder care into my handbag when he thought I wasn't looking. Even my pharmacist began speaking slowly, carefully, as though words might bruise me. "Clara told us to double-check your prescriptions," he said one morning. "You've been a bit mixed up lately, haven't you?" I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come. Because if I protested too loudly, they'd call that confusion. If I stayed silent, they'd call it compliance. Either way, I was trapped in her narrative. At home, the little changes became impossible to ignore. My letters stopped coming. When I asked Clara about it, she laughed and waved her hand. "Oh, Mom, mail piles up in that old box. I just had it redirected here so nothing gets lost." Plus, that word echoed. Because I was losing pieces of my life, quietly, efficiently, under the name of care. The next week, I noticed my pill bottles had changed. The labels looked newer, neater, but the pills were a different color. I asked her what happened. "Doctor updated your dosage," she said quickly. "Memory support, you know?" That night I didn't take them. I emptied the capsules into the sink and watched the powder swirl down the drain. The water carried away my fear and left something else behind: suspicion. I began to write everything down. Dates, times, things she said, things she moved. I kept the notebook under my mattress. The first line read, "You are not crazy. You know the truth." Some nights I'd wake up unsure of what day it was, not because I'd forgotten, but because she made me feel like I had. She'd move my keys, misplace my phone, even switch the channels on my television when I left the room. Then she'd sigh and say, "You're getting forgetful, Mom." "It's okay. Everyone your age does." One afternoon, I walked into the living room to find her sitting at my desk, my checkbook open. She didn't flinch when I asked what she was doing. She smiled, that new smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes. "Just paying some bills for you," she said. "You forgot about the utilities again." I hadn't. I'd set the reminders myself. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is safer than truth. Few days later, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was polite, professional, from my bank. "Mrs. Morrison, we just wanted to confirm your withdrawal from your savings account yesterday." Froze. "What withdrawal?" There was a pause. "A sum of $20,000 was withdrawn under your authorization." My throat went dry. "No, that's not possible. I haven't withdrawn anything." "Ma'am, we have your signature on file," the banker said gently. "Your daughter accompanied you. Everything seemed in order." My hands trembled. I could almost hear Clara's calm, confident tone explaining it away. The same tone she used when she told the pharmacist I was forgetful. I thanked the banker, hung up, and sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the neighborhood children were playing, their laughter carrying across the yard. The sound of innocence felt cruel. I looked around my home, the curtains I sewed with my own hands, the framed photo of Henry smiling on the wall, the life I'd built with love, and realized I was becoming a guest inside it. Clara came home that evening, humming as she dropped her purse on the counter. "How was your day, Mom?" she asked. "Fine," I said. My voice was steady, but my heart wasn't. "Did you take your medication?" "Of course." She smiled, reached out, and brushed my hair from my face. The same hand that forged my name, the same hand that turned kindness into control. "Good," she whispered. "I just want you to be okay." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But deep down I knew. The pieces were all falling into place. The mail, the money, the pills. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was theft dressed as care. That night, I tore out a new page in my notebook and wrote, "She's building a case against me. I have to stay ahead of her." Then, below it, in trembling letters, "Don't let her win." I pressed my hand over the words until the ink smudged. For the first time, I wasn't just documenting my days. I was collecting evidence. And I knew, sooner or later, that notebook would save me. The morning after the bank call, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my reflection in the stainless steel of the toaster. My face looked smaller, older, and tired, but my eyes, they were awake. I had spent months being treated like a ghost in my own house, but ghosts see everything. I knew now that silence wasn't weakness. It was my camouflage. I picked up my old address book, the one Clara never touched because she thought it was too outdated, and found a name written in faded blue ink: Franklin Reed. My late husband's best friend, retired lawyer, loyal as stone. The kind of man who read fine print for breakfast. My hands trembled as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Ruth. Good Lord, I haven't heard that voice in ages. I swallowed hard. Franklin. I need help. And I need you to promise you won't tell Clara. There was a long pause. Then his tone changed. Calm, precise, professional. I'm listening. That afternoon, I met him at his office. A small converted library tucked behind Main Street, the air thick with the smell of old paper and dust. I used to bring Clara here as a little girl. She'd sit on his floor, drawing pictures while Henry and Franklin talked about mortgages and insurance. Now, walking in felt like stepping back into a safer time, one where love wasn't a weapon. Franklin studied me carefully as I explained everything. When I finished, he took off his glasses and rubbed his chin. You're saying she took control of your accounts, forged signatures, redirected your mail, and has witnesses believing you're unwell? Exactly. And you have proof. I reached into my bag and placed my small notebook on his desk. The pages were covered in my handwriting. Dates, names, times, things Clara said, and strange bank withdrawals. He flipped through the notes slowly, nodding. This is meticulous. You've got the mind of a librarian, Ruth, organized and dangerous. For the first time in months, I smiled. Henry used to say the same thing. He leaned back in his chair. All right, let's see what we're up against. Within minutes, he was typing into his computer, calling in a favor from an old friend at the county clerk's office. I sat quietly, the sound of his keyboard clicking like a heartbeat. Then he stopped. His jaw tightened. She's filed a power of attorney document, signed by you, notarized last month. That's impossible, I whispered. He turned the screen toward me. There was my name, my signature. But it wasn't mine. It was close, too close. Franklin sighed. I've seen forgeries before, but this one's personal. Where would she even get your signature that clean? I thought for a moment. Then it hit me. From the library. I used to sign donor forms for years when I worked there. She could have found one. He nodded grimly. That's enough for a legal mess, but not yet a conviction. If we confront her now, she'll bury the evidence, and you'll look unstable, just like she wants. So what do we do? Franklin folded his hands. We let her win. For now. I stared at him. Let her win. Yes, you act confused. Forgetful. The more control she thinks she has, the sloppier she'll become. You've already proven she underestimates you. Let's make sure she keeps doing that. I sat in silence, the words sinking in. I'd spent months being treated like a helpless woman. Now I'd use that to destroy her game from the inside. Franklin, I said quietly, I can do that. His lips curved into a rare smile. I know you can. Henry used to tell me you were tougher than anyone he ever met. Let's prove him right. That night, I went home and found Clara in the kitchen, humming as she stirred soup. She looked up, all sugar and innocence. Oh, Mom, you were out. You should have told me. You know how worried I get. I smiled faintly. I forgot, I said, letting the words sound fragile. I've been forgetting a lot lately. Her face softened in satisfaction. That's okay, Mom. That's why I'm here, to help you. Good, I thought. Keep believing that. Over the next few days, I played the role perfectly. I misplaced my glasses on purpose. Asked her to repeat simple things. Once, I even pretended to take the wrong bus, calling her in a fluster. She arrived furious, but hid it under fake concern. Mom, you can't keep doing this, she scolded gently. You're not well. I know, dear, I murmured, lowering my eyes. Every performance she believed made her arrogance grow, And arrogance is always the first crack in a liar's armor. Franklin and I met twice a week in secret. We opened a new account in my name only, under his firm's address, and began tracking every transfer Clara made. She was draining my savings slowly. Small amounts to avoid suspicion. Classic fraud pattern, Franklin muttered, showing me the records. She's hoping you'll be declared incompetent before you notice. Then let's make her think I already am. He grinned. You really should have been a lawyer. One afternoon, I walked past Clara's room and saw her on the phone again. Her voice hushed but urgent. The lawyer's next. Once I have full control, I'll sell the house and move her into assisted living. No, she won't fight it. She's not all there anymore. My pulse hammered. I turned away before she noticed me, gripping the wall for balance. She wanted my home. The place Henry and I built from nothing. The last piece of him I had left. That night I wrote in my notebook, she's not just stealing my money. She's stealing my life. The words looked like they'd been carved instead of written. I stared at them until my vision blurred. Then I added another line underneath, one that made my heart steady again. But I'm still alive. The next morning I made her breakfast. Eggs, toast, and a smile she didn't deserve. When she kissed my cheek and left for work, I whispered to the empty kitchen, keep smiling, Clara. Keep pretending. Because I am too. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything changed. The fear that once held me hostage turned into something sharper, colder. A weapon forged in silence. And I was ready to use it. I learned quickly that proof isn't loud. It sits in corners, records itself in whispers, and waits for patience to find it. If Clara wanted to build a perfect lie, I would build the perfect way to bring it down. The first thing I did was something small and almost childish. I bought a tiny voice recorder and hid it in the old radio on my bookshelf. It was the kind of radio Henry used to tune when he drank his morning coffee. The radio that still smelled faintly of him. No one would think to look there. No one would suspect that beneath the golden grill, my voice was turning from memory into weapon. I left it on for days, 4 hours at a stretch, while Clara hummed in the kitchen and pretended to help me with crossword puzzles. I played the role she expected. The distracted mother who misplaced the milk, who didn't know the day of the week. The better I acted, the bolder she became. And the bolder she became, the more she revealed. The night I finally played the recordings back, I sat in the dark and listened. At first it was nothing. The clink of cups, the faint clatter of a spoon against porcelain. Then her voice, soft and clinical. The kind of voice a surgeon uses to calm a patient before the incision. Okay, Jen, remember. Just make sure the notary doesn't ask too many questions. Say Ruth signed in front of you. She was a little shaky, but she did it. Keep it simple. He'll accept it if the paperwork looks good. My hand went numb. She was coaching someone, giving instructions on how to fake a witness. The recording continued, and with every sentence, a picture formed. Clara orchestrating the forgery like a conductor guiding an orchestra. I could have gone to the police then. I could have smashed the radio and marched into the bank. But Franklin had warned me. If I acted too soon, she'd bury whatever evidence she could. So I kept listening. Let her think she had me. Let her grow cocky. With Franklin's help, I did the next sensible thing. I went to the doctor alone. I sat in the same waiting room where I'd taken Clara as a child, the same ticking clock above the reception desk. The nurse's smile was sympathetic when she checked my wrist. We'll run a few cognitive tests, just to be sure, Mrs. Morrison, she said. I answered everything calmly, deliberately. When you're pretending to be forgetful for someone else, you learn how to make the act convincing. But in that sterile room, under the fluorescent lights, I wasn't acting. I was collecting the thing that matters most against a lie. An objective record. The test showed what I already knew. My memory, my orientation, my executive function. All within normal limits for a woman my age. I asked for copies of the report, and the nurse looked at me like I was a woman trying to cling to dignity. She printed them anyway. Those papers in my bag were small, ordinary things, but they were thunderbolts in waiting. Franklin scanned them and grinned. "You've got better receipts than half the city," he said, and for the first time a real, crooked smile touched his face. We moved faster. Franklin arranged for a private investigator, a careful, quiet man named Marco who smelled of coffee and old books and who used to work fraud cases for the county. He was the kind of man who read bank statements like other people read novels. "Small deposits, strategic transfers," he said one afternoon, spreading pages across the kitchen table. "She's laundering the money in small batches so it looks like normal living expenses." Marco's handwriting underlined dates and figures. He traced the money like a pale river going through hidden channels. 100 here, then 500 there, each transfer into accounts with friendly names, shell accounts that vanished if you blinked. But Marco had patience. If Clara thought she could hide in the cracks of arithmetic, she hadn't met a man who read the margins for a living. We found it. An account under a name I'd never heard, with deposits that matched the withdrawals from my savings. It wasn't a fortune yet. It never was all at once, but it was proof. Her greed was careful but predictable. It moved in patterns like a heartbeat. Marco traced the IP addresses on some of the transfers and, astonishingly, found logins from Clara's phone. She'd been sloppy with her devices. She still used the same hotspot at the cafe down the street. She assumed she could hide behind routine. Routine is the enemy of secrecy. I remember the moment Franklin slid the bank statement across the table to me. The name on the account made my stomach drop. A friend of Clara's who'd moved away years ago, now the owner of a small florist business. I thought of the florist's bright shop window and bouquets that smelled like summer, and something cold and bird-bright uncoiled inside my chest. Clara had used other people like props in her play. That night I played the second set of recordings. This time Clara was bolder, laughing as she spoke. "He won't ask about the dates if the signatures look right," she said. "We'll tell them she signed when she was lucid. No one suspects us because who would? It's Ruth." "Ruth." She said my name like an accusation. The way she rolled it around her tongue, so familiar, so intimate, made my skin crawl. But it also made me laugh. Not with amusement, but with a clear, precise joy that felt like the first breath out of a long, cold winter. She thought she owned my name. She thought she owned my history. I didn't. Not anymore. With Marco's report, Franklin drafted the next move. We compiled the medical paperwork, the recordings, the bank traces, and the notary witnesses we could find who could confirm they were coached. We had enough to reopen the withdrawals as fraud, to question the power of attorney, to file a civil suit and press for criminal charges if needed. We had threads to pull. Threads become ropes. Ropes can pull down curtains. I slept the night before our first filing with my hand on the notebook that had become my map. The ink had smudged in places from my own tears. When I woke, the sun was a clean line across the floor. I made tea and looked at my reflection in the teacup. My face was the same, but something under the surface had changed. Calmness settled like a sheet. The kind of calm you get when you know the chess pieces are finally in place. I took a breath and whispered to the empty kitchen. "Let her think I'm fading. She won't see the end coming." For a woman who had been taught to keep the house and keep the peace, there was a luminous pleasure in turning records and receipts into instruments of justice. The collection was tedious, unromantic work, but it was mine, and it would be clean. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom, just a room full of witnesses and the truth playing loud enough to drown the lies. A week after Franklin finished compiling the evidence, Clara announced she was holding a family meeting. Her tone was syrupy sweet, almost theatrical. "We need to discuss Mom's care," she said, pretending to choke on concern. "It's time to make decisions." I could have refused, but Franklin's advice echoed in my head. Let her set the stage. You'll control the script. So I agreed. The meeting was held on a Sunday afternoon. Bright, clear, deceptively peaceful. Clara invited everyone. My cousins, my pastor, even Mrs. Holbrook from next door. She wanted an audience, and that was perfect. The bigger the crowd, the louder the fall. When I entered the living room, Clara stood beside the fireplace, hands clasped like a preacher before confession. "Mom," she said tenderly, "we just want what's best for you." Around her, faces I'd known for years looked at me with quiet pity. The air was heavy with unspoken judgment, the kind that sticks to your skin. "You've been forgetting things," she continued softly, pausing for dramatic effect. "And I think it's time we start the process of transferring responsibility. For your safety, of course." I sat down slowly, keeping my movements small and frail, letting my hands tremble just enough to feed her confidence. "Of course, dear," I said, voice cracking on purpose. "Whatever you think is best." She smiled, that smug little half-smile of victory, and placed a folder on the coffee table. "I've prepared the documents. It's a continuation of the power of attorney we already have. Just to make things easier." I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. The room was so quiet I could hear the tick of the wall clock. "Mom," she said gently, "can you tell everyone what year it is?" Gasps fluttered around the room. That was her trick. Perform concern while planting doubt. I lowered my eyes, let a beat of silence stretch. Then I looked up, straight into her eyes, and smiled. "Of course I can," I said. "It's the year you stopped pretending to love me." The room froze. For the first time Clara blinked. What?" she stammered. I stood, slow and deliberate, my frailty slipping away like an old coat. From my handbag I pulled out a small black device, the same recorder that had sat hidden in my radio for weeks. "You wanted a meeting," I said. "Let's make it productive. Press play." Clara's voice filled the room, unmistakable and sharp. "She doesn't even notice when I change her pills. The bank believed me last time. This'll be easy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I let the recording play longer. The laughter, the coaching, the instructions to forge signatures. Every second felt like a nail in the coffin of her lies. "Mom, this is ridiculous," Clara began, her voice shaking. "Quiet," Franklin said from the doorway. He stepped in, holding a neat stack of papers. "You might want to hear the rest." The next recording played. Clara laughing with her friend, mocking my confusion. The sound of my own daughter's betrayal filled the room, raw and metallic. "No one suspects us because who would? It's Ruth." I watched her crumble in real time. Her face drained of color. Her hands fluttered uselessly in the air, searching for an excuse that didn't exist. That's not me," she whispered. Franklin dropped the stack of papers on the table. "It is. And these," he said, flipping the top sheet, "are the bank transfers you authorized using forged signatures." He handed copies to everyone. My cousins, the pastor, the neighbors. One by one, the pity in their eyes turned to shock, then disgust. Clara lunged for the documents. "You can't prove I..." "Actually," Franklin cut in smoothly, "we can. Ruth's medical report confirms she's cognitively sound. The power of attorney you faked. It's been rescinded." And the notary you used has already confirmed you coached a witness. He leaned forward slightly. By the way, that forged document. It's now part of a criminal case file. The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the slow whir of the ceiling fan, slicing the air between us. You planned this, she said finally, her voice cracking. I met her gaze, calm and unblinking. No, Clara. You did. I just took notes. Tears welled in her eyes, but there was no innocence in them now, only fear. She turned to the crowd, pleading. She's lying. She's manipulating you. Mrs. Holbrook, who'd once believed her, spoke up. No, Clara. I heard your voice. We all did. The room shifted. The crowd wasn't an audience anymore. It was a jury. And the verdict was already written across their faces. Franklin gathered the last of the papers and slipped them into his briefcase. The bank's been notified. Your access has been revoked. Every cent you stole is being tracked. I suggest you get a lawyer. Clara's lips trembled. You're destroying me. I stepped closer, close enough for her to see the steadiness in my eyes. No, Clara. You did that the moment you decided my mind was easier to erase than my memories. For a long moment we just stared at each other. Mother and daughter, the mirror cracked. Then she broke. The confident woman who'd treated me like her property suddenly looked small, shrinking beneath the weight of her own lies. She sank into the chair, clutching her face as sobs tore through her composure. I didn't feel joy. I didn't even feel relief. What I felt was balance, like the world had stopped leaning the wrong way. Franklin placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. We should go, he said quietly. There's no need to watch the rest. I nodded, but before leaving, I turned to the people in the room. The ones who had pitied me, doubted me, whispered about me. Don't believe everything that looks like care, I said softly. Sometimes it's control wearing a smile. As I walked out, the sun hit my face, warm and steady. For months I'd been walking through fog, but now the air felt sharp, real. I wasn't the confused old woman she painted me to be. I was the mother who remembered everything and recorded it. Behind me I heard Clara's voice, faint and broken. Mom, please. I stopped at the door but didn't turn around. You wanted everyone to see the truth, Clara, I said quietly. Now they do. And with that, I stepped outside, the sound of the recorder still echoing in my mind like applause. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it arrives in silence, wearing a badge, carrying a file, and knocking politely at the door of someone who thought they'd never get caught. The morning they came for Clara, the neighborhood stood still. 2 officers in gray suits, not uniforms, just quiet professionalism. That made it worse. They asked for her calmly, their voices almost kind. She froze in the doorway, eyes darting toward me as if I might save her. I didn't move. They read the charges: fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, words that landed like stones in the space between us. Her fiancé, Ryan, stood behind her, his mouth half open in disbelief. Clara, he whispered, tell me this isn't true. But Clara had no words left to lie with. The truth had eaten through her vocabulary. I watched them lead her down the steps, wrists trembling as they slipped on the cuffs. The neighbors stared from behind curtains, the same neighbors who once believed her stories about my memory problems. Now they whispered again, but this time the pity wasn't for me. Franklin stood beside me, arms crossed, eyes steady. You okay? He asked. I'm not sure, I said softly. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like gravity. That's what justice is, he murmured. It brings everything back down where it belongs. The weeks that followed moved like molasses. Clara's world collapsed piece by piece. Her friends stopped calling. Her fiancé returned the engagement ring in an envelope with no note. The company she worked for suspended her, pending investigation. On the news they mentioned the case. A local woman accused of defrauding her elderly mother. The headline trended for a day. Comments poured in: shock, disgust, judgment. I didn't read them. I didn't have to. People always love a downfall, but I wasn't here for entertainment. I was here for closure. The bank restored my accounts. Every stolen dollar returned. Every fraudulent transaction reversed. I sat with Franklin as he slid the final document across the table. My name back where it belonged. Ownership. Independence. All yours again, he said. I looked at my reflection in the pen's silver cap. For the first time in months, I recognized the woman staring back. Not the fragile ghost Clara tried to invent, but the woman Henry married. The one who built a life from thrift and grit. Franklin, I said, I want to do something with it. Something that means she didn't destroy me for nothing. He raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? There's a foundation downtown. Helps seniors who've been scammed by their own families. They need funding for legal aid. He smiled. Poetic. No, I said quietly. Necessary. We set it up together. A donation from the reclaimed funds, enough to cover months of operations. I didn't want headlines or plaques. I just wanted one less mother to feel what I felt. The first court date came on a gray morning that smelled like rain. The courthouse was cold, echoing, the kind of place where lies sound smaller. Clara sat at the defendant's table, her once perfect hair tied back, her hands shaking as she whispered to her lawyer. When they called my name to testify, I walked to the stand slowly but with purpose. Her eyes met mine, full of something that looked like shame but wasn't quite. I told the truth, nothing more, nothing less. How she'd taken control of my finances, manipulated the narrative of my health, isolated me, and tried to erase me. The words came out steady, my voice carrying through the courtroom like a metronome. At one point I saw tears on her cheeks. They looked real. Maybe they were. But remorse is a currency that spends too late. When the judge called recess, Clara looked at me across the aisle, as if waiting for a sign that I still loved her. And I did, just not the way I used to. Love can survive disappointment but not deceit. A week later, before the sentencing, Clara sent a message through her lawyer. She wanted to see me. Franklin advised against it. She's looking for sympathy, he warned. I'm not going for her, I said. I'm going for me. So I went. The meeting was in a small interview room. Glass wall, 2 chairs, a table, nothing else. When she walked in wearing the pale beige of pre-trial detention, I barely recognized her. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something smaller. Mom, she whispered, sitting down. I don't know what happened. I thought I was helping. It got out of hand. You lied, I said simply. You took what wasn't yours and made me doubt my own mind. Her eyes filled again. Please. I don't want to lose you. I leaned forward, voice low but firm. You already did, Clara. You just didn't notice when it happened. She reached for my hand across the table, but I didn't move. You taught me something, I said softly. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to lose what you never deserved. The words hung in the air like a verdict. She broke again, shoulders shaking, tears staining the table. For the first time I didn't feel anger. Felt release. The guards came for her, and I stood. As they led her out, she looked back one last time. Her lips moved, maybe I'm sorry. Maybe Mom. It didn't matter. I'd heard all her words before, and none of them meant truth. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped. The clouds split open, letting a line of sunlight fall across the marble steps. I stood there for a long time, watching the light stretch across the street. Franklin joined me, holding an umbrella he didn't need. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Clean," I said. "Like the air after a storm." He smiled. "Then it's over." "No," I said, glancing back at the courthouse doors. "It's just balanced." I walked away slowly, the city humming around me. Buses, footsteps, voices. For the first time in months, every sound felt alive. Every breath felt earned. They thought they could take everything from me, my house, my money, my name. But what they forgot was this. You can steal a signature, not a soul. And I intended to spend the rest of my life proving that. The seasons turned while I wasn't looking. The last of the courtroom letters stopped arriving, the noise faded, and what was left was silence. A good silence, the kind that feels like healing instead of hiding. It's been 6 months since the trial. The house is mine again, every inch of it. The walls no longer echo with suspicion, only with the sound of wind brushing through the open windows. Sometimes I still expect to hear Clara's voice calling from the kitchen, but what comes instead is birdsong, and it's softer on the ears. My garden became my sanctuary. The roses are in bloom again. Henry's favorites, deep red and stubborn. They survived the winter just like I did. Every morning I put on my gloves and tend to them one by one, trimming away what's dead, feeding what still wants to grow. It's strange how much healing looks like gardening. Patience, pruning, light. I kneel beside the rose bed, the soil warm under my fingers. I talk to Henry sometimes, the way I used to when he sat on the porch sipping coffee. "We made it," I whisper. "She tried to bury me, but I grew roots." Franklin still checks in now and then, always formal, always kind. "The foundation you funded is doing well," he told me last week. "You've already helped 6 other families." That made me smile. Every time someone calls for help, every time a mother finds her way back to her dignity, a little bit of what Clara took from me returns. I don't hate her anymore. Hate is heavy, and I carried it long enough. I think she's still serving her sentence. Not just the legal one, but the kind that comes from knowing you destroyed something that loved you. Sometimes I wonder if she ever understood what she really stole. It wasn't the money, or even the house. It was the trust. And once you lose that, no verdict can give it back. There's a peace in acceptance. I learned that peace doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop needing the past to apologize. This morning I found an envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. A letter from Clara. The handwriting was shaky, uncertain. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I'm sorry. I'm learning what it feels like to be powerless. I think that's what I made you feel, and I see it now. Please be happy. That's the only way I can start over." I sat at the kitchen table for a long time holding that letter. The words didn't fix anything, but they didn't have to. Sometimes acknowledgement is enough. Sometimes it's the only apology that matters. I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer beside my notebook, the one that started it all. The first page still says, "You are not crazy. You know the truth." I smiled at it. The notebook isn't evidence anymore. It's a reminder that even when the world doubts you, your own handwriting can anchor you. I took my tea to the garden and watched the sunlight crawl slowly over the petals. The light was golden, the kind that looks like forgiveness. The bees moved lazily from flower to flower, unbothered by anything. My neighbors wave when they pass now. They don't look at me with pity anymore, but with respect. Mrs. Holbrook brought me pie last week and said, "You taught us all something, Ruth, that quiet people shouldn't be underestimated." I laughed. Quiet people are just waiting for the right time to speak. As the afternoon sun dipped low, I sat on the old bench Henry built and let the wind move through my hair. It smelled of earth and roses and freedom. There's no music in moments like that, only the steady rhythm of being alive. I thought about the woman I was a year ago, trembling, uncertain, afraid of her own daughter's shadow. That woman would never have imagined sitting here now, strong and unbroken. Healing isn't about forgetting the storm. It's about remembering you survived it. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. The whispers, the forged papers, the courtroom, the apology. They didn't hurt anymore. They felt distant, like echoes from another lifetime. Every lie that once cut me now feels like proof that I outlasted them. I don't know if I'll ever see Clara again. Maybe one day, when she's ready to live honestly, she'll knock on this door. And if that day comes, I'll open it. Not to forget, but to prove that forgiveness isn't surrender. It's freedom. As the last light of day touched the garden, I whispered to myself, softly enough for only the wind to hear. They said I was losing my mind, but I never lost my memory. I remembered every lie, every signature, every silence. Age doesn't make you weak. It just teaches you when to be quiet before you strike. The line felt heavier than anything I'd ever said aloud. It wasn't just a reflection. It was the truth carved into every year I've lived. The camera of memory panned slowly. Over the roses, over the porch, over the woman who was once a victim and now just a person again. The sun dipped below the trees, leaving a trail of gold across the window panes. I smiled at the horizon, the kind of smile that doesn't need witnesses. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had peace. For the first time in a long time, I felt Henry's presence, not as a memory, but as warmth, like he was sitting right there, watching the garden with me. "We're okay now," I whispered. The breeze carried my words through the roses, scattering petals like applause. And for once, I let myself believe the world was listening. The story didn't end with the lie. It ended with the woman who refused to forget the truth.